Hello everybody, happy Thursday. I'm Pia from Stitches and Scraps, and this is Lunchtime Live, episode 117. For those of you who are new here, Lunchtime Live is my video newsletter for Stitches and Scraps. That is my dog, Millie. Millie, go upstairs, baby. Lunchtime Live is my video newsletter for Stitches and Scraps, so I'll tell you everything that's going on at Stitches and Scraps and then what's in store for next week. And then we end with some sort of demo or feature. For 2022, I've been doing a Stitch of the Week demo, alternating between knit and crochet stitches. So today is a knit day, and we are going to be looking at Knit Fisherman's Rib, which is a super stretchy, super thick, bouncy rib. So that's going to be our demo at the end of the session here. As I go through and tell you about the different things going on the site, check out the description on this video and you'll see a link, right? At that link, there's a post that has a list of everything I plan to talk about. So if you want to get the patterns that I show you or the tutorials that I tell you about, you can absolutely go to that link and you'll find all of the links there. All of that information is there. So let's jump right in. What's new? Just this morning, I posted this pattern, which I've shown you guys a couple weeks ago, I think. This is the table scarf, the String of Pearls table scarf. And it's got a couple of features I wanted to show you. So let me go over here and see if I can't zoom in. Okay, so it has 5 rings like this, right? Let me zoom out, actually. I think I'm zoomed in too much. There we go. Okay. So it has 5 rings like this across the length of the scarf. The 2 on each end, or the one in the center is different, is what I'm trying to say. The 2 on each end are a little smaller, and the one in the center is slightly bigger. These baubles are slightly closer together here, so that it's good for like a centerpiece. Hi, Helene, good to see you. And then these ones are slightly wider apart, so the center hole is a little bit narrower. The other thing I want to show you, I don't know if you can quite make it out, but do you see a slight difference in the shading here and here? Like you can almost see beige-ish stripes going along here if you look really closely. I don't know if you can tell. I can tell because I'm looking at the piece directly. I'm not sure if the lighting shows it. The reason that that's happening is, good morning, Mary. Guys, let me know if you can see it. Do you see that there's a little beige running through here and there isn't through here? Do you see that kind of striping effect? That is intentional. And it happens because I did this. You'll notice that the baubles, oh good, okay. You'll notice that the baubles are beige. It's actually cream is the color. The baubles are cream, and I worked them like tapestry crochet, where you work over the unused color, right? So as you make each of these stitches, you're carrying the unused color underneath, and then you change colors when you want to make a bauble. But I only did that on 2 rows. So on the bauble row, I carried the color and used it for baubles as I needed it. And then on the next row, I carried it all the way back. And that gives you this really subtle kind of striping pattern. If you use colors that are more contrasting than I did, that pattern will be even more striking. So you'll see that a little bit more. So this is a striped sort of a pattern, but in a very, very subtle way. I used for this, and this is exciting. I was excited to find this yarn. This is King Cole Big Value Recycled Dishcloth Cotton. So what I like about this yarn, first of all, it only comes in these 2 colors. They don't have any other colors. And it is, if you look at the listing, they say it's perfect for dyeing. It's meant to actually take dye really well. So you can dye this, and I love that there's 2 shades because if you were to dye this, the white and the cream will take the dye a little bit differently, and you'll still get that tonal effect, but in a different color. So I think that's totally cool. I have some left over and I plan to play with dyeing it later. I wanted this table scarf to be white and beige because it's called String of Pearls. So, you know, it's a string of pearls. But I have extra of this left over, so I do plan to play with that and maybe dye something a little bit later. It is not 100% cotton. It is 85% cotton and 15% polyester. And it is recycled. I believe it's recycled cotton. I believe the cotton content is what's recycled, but I'm not 100% sure on that. So it didn't really clearly say it on the website either, but there is recycled content in it. So very exciting yarn. I do not have this yarn in my store. I cannot carry all of the yarns. I wish I could, but you can find that yarn on, if you go to the King Cole website, they have a find a stockist, because they're a UK company. So find a stockist button, which will take you to all of the places. Like I think you put in your zip code or area and it will take you to, they'll send you a list of all the people who stock King Cole yarns in your area. So you can find a local yarn store, or there are places where you can buy it online as well. So King Cole recycled dishcloth cotton, and they sent me the yarn for this. I asked for it, and it is, I love it. I love working with it. It feels just like a very soft cotton. It's even a little softer than most of the dishcloth cottons I've worked with. But anyway, so this is the String of Pearls table scarf. Let me get this out of the way. It's kind of big. It's hard to show off, but I just posted that this morning. So go take a look at that. And then the other thing that I posted earlier this week, I'm going to show you this bag again, is another tutorial for the snowflake bag, which is bag number 6 in our bag along cal. So this time, this tutorial was for the surface crochet and the snowflake embroidery. So I've got that up. That came out, I want to say on Tuesday. So that's up on the site as well. Guys, there's just one more tutorial left, and then the bag along cal is done for the year. Can you believe it? 6 bags. The last tutorial is attaching this purse frame. So how to sew on that purse frame. Now I do have a note, because I wanted to show you inside the bag. It's not the neatest when you do this embroidery, right? You see that? See all that? Well, I didn't weave in my end, so ignore the end I didn't weave in. But even here, it's not the neatest when you do the embroidery, right? Remember our last bag? I had the tutorial for how to make a box bottom lining. Guys, this is a box bottom bag. Before you sew on the frame, you can attach a lining to the bag. It's the same shape as the last bag we made. See that? This one's more square. That one was more, that one wasn't as deep. But in that tutorial for making a box bottom bag lining, I have instructions to make it to any size, like measure this, plug in the numbers, and here's what you make. So you can totally make a lining for this, and it wouldn't even take that long. I didn't want to do it because there was already enough going on with this bag, but if you don't like that little bit of yarn that shows from the embroidery, you can totally line it, and then you don't have to see it. So that is what's new on the blog this week. For next week, I'll be doing that last tutorial, and then the bag along will be over. The only last thing to do is the giveaway prize. The deadline for entering the giveaway is December 23rd, the day before Christmas Eve. So if you want to go on there, make sure you get on there and enter the giveaway. The link is there in that list, in that post. So enter that giveaway. It's our last one for the year. I am not at this point planning on doing any sort of crochet along or knit along next year. My focus is going to be a little bit different next year. Honestly, I kind of feel like I have a huge library of patterns, and some of them are very old and need to be updated. Like the yarns they used are no longer available, stuff like that. I'm going to be focusing more next year on compiling patterns into books, because I have several of the same type. And I'll add new patterns for those books specifically. And I'm going to focus on updating some of my older patterns. So I won't necessarily have a brand new pattern every week. I'm not necessarily doing a crochet along, but I will have some new stuff for you. It's just not going to be the same schedule you're used to the last year or two. But we will still be doing Lunchtime Live. And I wanted to tell you, I've made a change in the format. For next year, we're not doing a stitch of the week every week, because that gets old after a while, right? There's only so many stitches. Well, no. I could probably do another 3 years of a stitch of the week, but we're going to take a break from that. What I'm going to do is a different feature every month or every week for the month. So like once a month, I'm going to try and bring you a featured product from another company and hopefully a coupon code to go with it every time. If I can. I'm still working. I've got 3 of them lined up. And then once a week, I'm going to bring you a charity. Sorry, once a month, I'll bring you a charity of the month, and we'll focus on that. Once a month, I'll have some sort of coupon or deal from one of my stores. And then once a month, we'll do a demo. So, and then there's one extra week a month, and there's some holidays in there. So some of that may get shifted around, but I kind of want to make things a little more exciting next year with some savings and some new features. So that's what I'm going to do with Lunchtime Live next year. It's still, some of it's still being planned, so it's not all set, but I've got the first quarter all set. So that is how we're starting next year, at least. Let me see what else I have to tell you. I told you about that. Oh, next week's Lunchtime Live, we're going to be doing crochet waffle stitch, which is a post stitch type of a pattern. And that's it for news. So let's jump right into the brioche ribbing. This is very similar in some ways. It's a very similar type of fabric. I'm going to zoom in a little more. It's a very similar type of fabric to the fisherman's rib that we were working on. And it uses, you know, that one used that knit one below, which we learned in the bee stitch, to create a stitch that's very similar to the brioche rib that we're working on. So you see how deep this ribbing is and how dense it is. It's much more puffy. Look at it from the side. It's much more raised and textured than a regular 1-1 knit rib. Okay, it is a 1-1 knit rib, but each stitch is worked twice because it's a series of slip stitches and then knitting. It's actually wrapped slip stitches that you then knit together when you do the knit stitch on the next row. So there's no purls until you bind off too, which is, or well, I lied. I did purls on the selvage stitches. But other than that, there's no purls in the actual ribbing pattern until you bind off. So I've cast on 10 stitches here. We'll talk about stitch counts in a little bit. I'm doing a slightly different selvage from my normal one. I am, for the 2 end stitches, I'm going to purl the last stitch every time, and I'm going to slip the first stitch purlwise with the yarn in back every time. So that'll give me a nice clean selvage. So for the first setup row, we're going to do the slip stitches, but we're not going to do the brioche knit stitches because we don't have what we need for that. So there's 2 stitches involved in this. There's a wrapped slip stitch, which is sometimes called a yarn over slip or a slip yarn over or a yarn forward slip yarn over. There's all different abbreviations. It's all the same thing. What you're going to do, the idea of it is you're going to slip this stitch and you're going to wrap the yarn across it as you do so. So we're going to bring the yarn to the front first because we need it in the front to wrap it. Then we're going to slip this stitch, okay? And then we're going to bring the yarn behind the needle again. And you see how that wraps diagonally around that stitch? That basically, it's not a wrap stitch. A wrap stitch would be if I did like that, but it is crossing that stitch. Let's call it a crossed slip stitch, okay? You'll most likely, I think most of the tutorials I looked at listed it, because I wanted to see how people said it. Most of them listed it as a yarn over slip or a slip yarn over. So you'll probably see that. Now I'm doing this English style. It's different if you're doing it continental. I'll show you that later. But technically I'm bringing the yarn to the back, right? But the way I hold my yarn, if I just hold it here, it's going to go to the back when I knit the next stitch. So I'm just holding it there. Now it's going across to the back, right? And I'm knitting the next stitch. Okay, so let's do another one of those slip yarn overs. So bring the yarn to the front, slip the stitch. Technically I'm turning the yarn to the back, but I'm not going to hold it like this. That's awkward. I'm holding it up here, and then I'm going to knit the next stitch. The one thing you don't want to do is bring the yarn to the back in front of your needle. That is not what we're doing. That doesn't wrap that, right? You need that wrap. So, or sorry, I keep saying wrap. It's not wrap. You need that cross, okay? You need it to go across the needle like that. So make sure you're not bringing it to the back in front. You want to bring it across the needle to the back. So if you just leave it in front, it's going to go to the back when you knit. And then you knit the next one. So we're alternating between this crossed or slip, yarn over slip, okay? and a regular knit stitch, just for this first setup row. Yarn over, slip, regular knit stitch. Okay, I told you I'm purling for my last stitch. Oh, and I actually wanted to show you something, but I started the wrong way. I started with a slip, didn't I? Okay, you know what? I'm going to show you, pretend that, actually, you know what? I'm just going to take out that last, no, I'll leave it. Okay. So pretend that I had to purl this stitch, because I wanted to show you, because I'm knitting English, I told you that you can just hold it here and it'll cross over when you knit, right? But if you need to purl, you don't want to just purl with it in front, because that doesn't do anything, right? You need it to cross over the needle. So if you need to purl, like for a selvage stitch or something, bring it all the way to the back and then bring it around to the front again. Did you see that? So I crossed the needle to bring it to the back, and then I brought it around in front of the needle, or going around the tip of the needle, okay? And then you can purl and you still get that cross stitch. If you're not getting that cross, you are not doing it right. So make sure that when you do the next stitch, whatever it is, your yarn is crossing over that slipped stitch. Make sure it crosses. Now for this one, I'm purling the last stitch for my selvage, and then we are going to turn. Okay, so now you can see we've alternated between these regular, this zoom is not right, hang on. Focus. There we go. Okay, so you can tell that we're alternating between these kind of regular stitches where you just see one loop and these slipped stitches where you see two, because it's crossed over. You see that? When we get to those slipped stitches, we're going to work that yarn over with the slipped stitch. So let's do the next row. And now this is the repeating row, because working that yarn over with that stitch is called a brioche knit stitch. So we're going to see that. I'm slipping my first stitch for the yarn over, for the selvage. Words. Okay. Now this first stitch doesn't have a cross on it, right? So I'm going to put a cross on it. I'm going to slip it. So I'm going to bring the yarn in front. I'm going to slip this stitch and I'm going to cross it. Okay. Then I'm going to knit this stitch with the yarn over that's attached to it. So the yarn over is not in front or behind, it crosses over it, right? It's over. It's not just paired with it, it's like crossed over it. So we're going to knit those two together. Okay? That is called a brioche knit stitch. So again, bring the yarn in front, slip one, okay, let the yarn cross over, and knit these two together, which is that slip stitch plus that yarn over. Okay, bring the yarn in front, slip, knit these two together. Okay, and watch that that yarn crosses. Bring it in front, slip, knit these two together. And then for my last stitch, I'm purling. Okay. So now you can sort of see we're setting up that corrugated rib. It's going to take a couple more rows to see it, but it does actually look like that. I want to show you what happens when you're doing this continental, because the yarn handling is a little different. The stitches are the same, but the way the yarn is handled is a little bit different. So let me pick up this yarn, and I'm not as proficient at continental, so I apologize. We're going to slip this first stitch, okay? Now this next stitch is the yarn over slip. So I bring the yarn forward. See, the yarn was back here when I slipped my stitch. I'm bringing it forward, which is a nice smooth motion, okay? And now I want to slip this stitch, okay? And I want to do a yarn over. So what I like to do, like you could slip the stitch and then you can put the yarn over it like that. All right, you see that? What I like to do is kind of one smooth motion where you stick your hook under this stitch, or start your needle under that stitch and under the working yarn, and kind of slip them both like that. And now the yarn's at the back. Okay, notice that the yarn is at the back because I'm doing it continental. When I was doing it English, I left the yarn at the front, and then when I knit, it was automatically moving to the back, right? That doesn't happen with continental. You need the yarn to be at the back so that you can knit the next stitch. Do that brioche knit where you're knitting the wrap with the slip. Okay, so bring the yarn to the front. slip this next stitch with that yarn. So you do the yarn over and the slip in one motion, and then knit the next two together. I'm going to show you a little bit faster. Yarn forward, pick up that stitch, slip and yarn over at the same time, knit the next stitch with the brioche knit the next stitch. Okay. Yarn forward. See how I did that just as I slipped the stitch off of my needle? Yarn forward, slip the yarn over and the stitch at the same time, and then brioche knit. Sorry, I'm not as smooth with Continental. And then I'm going to purl this stitch. Really not as smooth with Continental purling. There we go. Okay. So if you're a Continental knitter, just the stitch is the same. The motion is the same. The yarn's coming forward. It's going over the top to the back. It's just how you handle the yarn is a little bit different. Let me do one more English style, and then we will talk about binding off and multiples and all of that. So again, English style, I'm slipping this one for the selvage. Then I'm doing this yarn forward slip. Technically the yarn's going over, which will happen when I do this brioche knit. Okay. Yarn forward, slip, brioche knit. Yarn forward, slip, brioche knit. So that yarn over slip, however you want to manage your yarn is cool depending on how you're holding it. Just make sure that when you finish your slip stitch, it has a yarn over crossing over it. That's what makes the brioche. So what is actually happening when we do this stitch? Well, remember when we did that knit one below, it kind of, the stitch that was on the current row kind of dropped off and wrapped itself around the stitch that we were knitting? Well, that's what happens with this. This yarn over kind of drops off and wraps itself around the knit stitch that we're doing. It becomes part of the knit stitch. So you get a double thick knit stitch. And since we're turning, we're alternating. So this one was slipped last time, right? Because we do the yarn over slip, right? And then this time it's going to be knit. So one time it's slipped, one time it's knit. In essence, every row gets worked twice. It is a little bit slow, but every row gets worked twice, which makes it really great for color work. But I'm not going to get into brioche color work here because that's a whole other tutorial. But each stitch gets knit twice. It has twice as much yarn in it. So it's puffy. It's very warm. It's very puffy. It's very dense. It's also super stretchy. So here I just used a regular long tail cast on. You're probably going to want a stretchier cast on if you want that super stretch out of it. Although I made this one kind of stretchy. But this has so much stretch. Like this just stretches for miles. So that is brioche knit. Now I want to talk to you about multiples real quick. I did an even number here, right? So let's look. I have 10 stitches here. 2 of them are my selvage stitches. So there's 8 stitches for the brioche pattern. Okay, which means that I can go slip knit, slip knit, slip knit, slip knit. So I'm either starting, so I'm always starting with a slip and ending with a knit, right? You could also flip that. You could always start with a knit and end with a slip. But then every row is going to start with a knit and end with a slip, right? Because it's in pairs. If you want to do an odd number, which you totally can do, then you're going to go like, this one would be slip, knit, slip, knit, slip, knit, slip. So you would start and end with a slip, right? So then when you do the next row, you're going to have to start and end with a knit. So you have to go knit, slip, knit, slip, knit, slip, knit, which means that that becomes a 2-row repeat then instead of a 1-row repeat if you have an odd number. You also want to pay attention if you have an odd number to what the selvage you choose is. The reason that I'm working this current selvage stitch is because it fits nicely into the ribbed pattern. Do you see how this just looks part of it? It turns this way, so it looks like it's part of, because this is that selvage stitch, right? So it turns forward to look like the ribbing. I think that's the selvage stitch, or the other one. Nope, it's the other one. The other one turns backwards. like that, so that it lines up nicely for the ribbing. And this side turned forward so that it lines up nicely for the ribbing. So that's what makes this selvage work well with this specific pattern. If you switch up the stitches, you might want to switch up the selvage, which whether you're knitting the last stitch or knitting the first stitch or purling the last stitch, you might want to switch that up. And that is it for brioche rib. So if are there any questions on that? I know that was a lot to talk about, and what it is the concept of brioche is really simple. It's just that wrapped slip stitch paired with knitting the wrap and the slip stitch together. So those two techniques work together to make this really puffy ribbing. But there's so much more you can do with it. It goes, like, you can take that concept and just expand it exponentially. You could put 2 brioche knits next to each other if you slipped 2 stitches next to each other on the last row. If you do that, you can make your lines move because you can add in space between the lines of your ribbing. You can do 2 colors, and you can get this really neat effect because the stitches are wrapped each time that you slip them. So you get the colors wrapping around each other for really, really nice 2-color effects. Brioche is like this whole extra world of knitting that you can get into if you just learn those 2 stitches, which is that wrapped slip stitch, the yarn over slip stitch, and the brioche knit. So that's all I have for you today. If there's no questions, I'm just going to say have a great weekend, and I will see you next week. Bye.